Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Marlene Biener, and I am the Chief Operating Officer at the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, or APA. We are a national nonprofit organization. We support prosecutors and their partners across the country to help build safer, fairer, and more effective justice systems. We are so glad that you are here with us today for this important and timely conversation about prosecutor-led approaches to low-level retail theft, diversion, and deflection. As you all are aware, retail theft presents a growing challenge for communities across the country. It impacts businesses, both large and small, it strains resources, and it raises public safety concerns. So prosecutors across the country have been increasingly exploring innovative strategies that prioritize accountability while also addressing underlying needs and improving outcomes for participants, for retailers, as well as for their communities at large. And over the past 3 years, APA has been working with 4 pilot site jurisdictions to either develop or expand their deflection or diversion programs that are specifically focused on low-level retail theft. And each of the sites developed their own unique models that were tailored to the needs of their communities. And they also collected data to help understand more about the root causes of the low level retail theft and also measure the impact of the program and participation in the program. So today you're going to hear from 2 of these jurisdictions that have been leading the way in this space. They're going to be walking us through how their programs work, what they've learned, and what they would recommend to you all. You'll also hear from our research partner who analyzed the data that was collected from the pilot sites, and they're going to be sharing key findings and takeaways. So today, we are so pleased to be joined by Jennifer Reed from the Columbus City Attorney's Office. Jennifer is the lead prosecutor for the Procedural Justice Initiative at City Attorney Zach Klein's office. Jennifer has been a key leader in Columbus's retail theft deflection efforts and has helped develop and implement this prosecutor-led model that works to connect participants to services and maintain strong partnerships with local businesses as well as with community stakeholders. We're also joined today by Preston Schaub and Nicole Kirkaldy, who are with the Yolo County District Attorney's Office in California. Preston is a supervising deputy district attorney, and Nicole is the restorative justice and diversion program director. And they have both played central roles in developing Yolo County's retail theft diversion program. And they use a restorative justice model that's aimed at identifying the needs and providing community-based support and resources to participants. And finally, we're joined today by Dr. Sarah Jensen. She is a senior researcher at Justice System Partners. And Dr. Jensen led the evaluation of APA's pilot sites, and she's going to be sharing with us key data insights around outcomes, participant engagement, and also what jurisdictions should be considering when designing or scaling similar programs. Finally, we're joined by Joy Rapella. Joy is a prosecutor fellow with APA, and she worked with each of our 4 pilot sites to help them stand up and implement their unique programs. So together, they all bring a range of perspectives. They'll be talking to us about program design, implementation, and data and evaluation. And we're thrilled to have them here with us today. Before we dive in, I just want to highlight 2 new resources that APA has released based on this work. First is our Retail Theft Diversion Toolkit. This includes practical guidance and planning templates for offices who are interested in either starting or strengthening their own program. And second is our Lessons Learned and Resource Guide. This captures all of the insights, the challenges, the findings, as well as some recommended practices from the pilot sites and others who are doing similar work across the country. So I'll be dropping both of those in the chat in just a moment, and they'll also be included in a follow-up email after this webinar. We hope they'll be useful to you and to your teams as you start to think about your own approaches to retail theft. As we go through today's presentations, we encourage you to submit questions using the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel. And we've saved time at the end, and we're going to try to answer as many of the questions as we can. And also the slides will be made available to you after the session. So of course, feel free to take notes if you'd like, but just know that the slides will be shared. And today's webinar will also be recorded for your reference later or to share with your peers. Okay, with that, I will turn it over to our first speaker, Jennifer. Please take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, APA and Merlene, for having us here today. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the program that City Attorney Zach Klein has put into place here in Columbus. So if we can go to that next slide. This obviously is, tantamount to the success of any program is having buy-in from your elected official. We are so lucky here in Columbus because Zach is really strongly rooted in his commitment to restorative justice principles and really making Columbus safe, but also a place where people feel like they have the resources to succeed. And so that's where our kind of Buckeye diversion programming takes root. So we'll go to the next slide. So I took over this program after it had already been started. And what they did was they wanted to build out a diversion-led program that focused on the social determinants of health and really how lack of resources affects people and their kind of not desire, but their like need to commit these low-level retail theft crimes. And so what they did was they brought in a bunch of community partners to try to figure out what was going on with the Columbus population as a whole with regards to the lack of resources. Franklin County specifically is super resource rich, but we don't have a lot of the connections necessary to make sure that the resources are reaching the people who need them. So that was kind of where the programming was grounded. Move to the next one. Thank you. So the first iteration of our theft diversion program is called Buckeye Diversion, and it started in 2019. And what they did was they wanted participation from our big box retailing stores and also a strong partnership with our community health workers, which we have through a hub that called Health Impact Ohio. So we have a couple of community health workers that work with us from 2 different organizations to help us with this work. And the participants will be screened in after we get their paperwork from a merchant about a theft. And then they work with their community health worker for 6 months on whatever lack of resources they've identified or whatever needs they've identified. So we'll go to the next one. Part of the success of this program really stems from the buy-in from the merchants and our direct filing program. So I don't know, depending on your jurisdiction, what your police response rate is like for low-level theft from retailers, but here it's really hard for our police to get out to Walmart, Target, Kroger on a low-level retail theft case, just because they're oftentimes responding to other more higher profile calls. So a lot of the merchants were really struggling with that lack of police response and reached out to Zach and wanted to come up with a system that allowed them to still file these retail theft offenses without having to have police involvement. So Zach and our team here worked up our direct filing program where the merchants submit their paperwork for shoplifting incidents directly to our matrix system. They're all trained from our staff on how to upload their matrix packets, what they need for their complaints, their probable cause affidavits, their incidents reports, and then the prosecutors will look at those packets and make sure that there's probable cause, make sure we've got all of the things we need on our end to approve the charges. Once the charges are approved, a liaison or a representative from the store just comes into our office and picks up the complaints and files them down on the second floor. This has really benefited our program because, as I'll get into when I talk about our deflection program, we're able to kind of impact this population closer in time based on the direct filing than if, say, the police had filed it and it went out on a summons and maybe they didn't have a good address, so it got sent back and got another summons. Apologize, I have a summer cold. It's awful. So it's really helped us impact the population a little bit closer in time to the offense and really address the needs when they're happening as opposed to maybe 6 or 8 months down the road. We'll go to the next one. Thank you. So Buckeye Deflection is our pilot program that we developed with the help of the APA through this program. And what we wanted to do was think of a way to expand Buckeye Diversion and impact more people. So our standard program, Buckeye Diversion, comes in, the case gets filed, they come to arraignment, and then at the arraignment stage, we screen them with the community health worker and try to figure out what the underlying needs are that need to be addressed to help that person not reoffend in the future and kind of just set them up for a better kind of path to success. Buckeye Deflection is the idea that we can actually impact this population before we file criminal charges. And so we identified 3 pilot locations, Macy's, Meijer, and Walmart, and we actually siphoned out some of their submissions to go through our Buckeye Deflection program. We try to focus really strongly on crimes of need as opposed to people who are potentially engaged in organized retail theft, because we're hearing a lot of feedback from our merchants about having issues with the organized retail theft losses. And so a lot of these people who come into either diversion or deflection, they're not going to be coming into our program if they're stealing like big ticket items like a power washer from Lowe's or a KitchenAid mixer from Target. We're focusing more on people who are stealing basic necessities, food, clothing, things for their children. We'll go to the next one. Sorry, guys. Take a sip of water. So what we're doing with Buckeye Deflection is we're screening people in to go through our needs assessment with our community health worker. And what that looks like is a Zoom call that we set up and facilitate through our office, where they meet with the community health worker and really discuss what's going on with them and their current situation. We are screening the deflection participants prior to filing criminal charges. And so, excuse me, I think I'll actually, Nikki, ask you to go to the next slide. Sorry. I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself. But so for the deflection cases, the participants are, they need to have 2 or fewer prior theft offenses in the last 5 years and 2 or fewer pending theft offenses. Our Buckeye Diversion programming allows for 5 prior theft offenses in the last 5 years and up to 5 pending cases. And so for deflection, we didn't want to, we wanted to keep our group for deflection a little bit smaller since it is pre-charge. And so we don't have as much of the stick and the carrot since the charges haven't actually been filed. So the participants also need to not have been violent with loss prevention. The items stolen need to appear to have been for personal use as opposed to those big ticket items. So once we've identified that they're a potential deflection participant, first thing we do is notify the merchants. So we're reaching out to our merchant filing partners and making sure that they're okay with us offering deflection. The success in this program, I really think, lies in our relationship with the merchants and our transparency with them. So with diversion and deflection, I am always reaching out to merchants ahead of time to make sure that they're okay with the offer. And then if they're not okay with the offer, I'm trying to work with them to get them okay with the offer, or I will say, okay, I agree with you for whatever reason, and then we don't offer them the program. But most of the time from my end, I want more people in the program because I really think it has a lot of value. So I'm going to try to convince the merchant, hey, this person really could benefit from being in the program. So once we have that okay from the merchant, they're okay on the background end, we send out a letter. This was one of the roadblocks for us with the deflection program. The first iteration of the letter, we really didn't get a lot of responses. And so I worked, one of the things we kind of worked and reworked with the APA partners on this was how to get a letter that was effective enough to communicate to the potential participant, hey, we have this resource, we want to help you, we don't want to file criminal charges, but not so nice as for them to not respond and not care enough about it. So in addition to reworking the letter, we also worked up a brochure or a flyer, and I didn't put it in my presentation, but this is just an example, and it just kind of adds a little bit of legitimacy to the letter in the world of like scams and AI and all of that. I think that having something that has a little tangible feel of it being official really helps. So we send out the letter. We ask them to reach out specifically to me to set up their screening. And then we hold screenings 3 days a week in the morning with our community health workers. So the participants will come in, screen with that community. Oh gosh, I'm almost done. Okay, next slide. Oh, sorry. God, didn't think I would run out of time. So we screen them with the community health worker. For deflection, we're putting people in the program anywhere from 1 month to 6 months, depending on their needs. A lot of our deflection people are no criminal record, usually youthful offenders. So here you'll see some of the pathways that our community health workers have identified to help people with. Our standard offer, if a person has no criminal record and this is their first offense, we're offering them 5 hours of community service and then agreeing not to file. That is different. Our usual offer for first-time offenders who have charges filed is for them to go through a class, a theft diversion class, which again is 5 hours and has a cost to it. But so we decided this was an alternative to that class to kind of impact them, but have them impact the community. So we've got about 24 successful completions last year for our deflection program, 9 for this year. It seems to be really successful. Obviously, I'm involved in it, so I think it's successful, but the feedback we have from participants and from the community at large is really positive. So I will go ahead and stop because I think I'm almost out of time. But if anybody has questions, I will be here for questions. Thanks.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for showing up for the webinar today. Again, my name is Preston Schaub. I'm the supervising deputy DA here in Yolo County, California, who's responsible for our diversion program. Seated to my left is Nicole Carley. She is our director of our restorative justice program, and we're going to take a few minutes to kind of discuss our program, some of the partnerships we formed over the years through collaboration with retailers, and some of the specific educational opportunities we have for individuals who are engaged in low-level retail theft. Next slide. Okay, so first let's define what restorative justice is. This is a quote from Howard Zehr. He is sort of the founding father of the modern concept of restorative justice being used in the criminal justice system. I think a bulk of his work started in the 70s, and he has written many books. If you're interested in learning more about restorative justice, I highly recommend picking up one of them, and he can give you a pretty good idea of where to start. But essentially, it's a process that involves, to the extent possible, those who have a stake in a specific offense and to collectively identify and address harms, needs, and obligations in order to heal and put things as right as possible. So really what that means is you're bringing the stakeholders from the community, the people who are harmed, the person who caused the harm, you're putting them together into one room and you're talking about what happened. You're discussing what the harms were, how to make it right, and how are we going to restore that person back up into their community standing, hence restorative justice. Go ahead, thank you. How can it be used in the criminal justice system? Well, you can use it pretty much anywhere you want because it's an informal process. Wherever you think it fits, it can fit. In California, we had an assembly bill that passed a couple years ago where now prosecutors have to advise victims of crime at pretty much every stage in the proceeding that restorative justice is a thing. There are programs out there that you can take advantage of if you want to take advantage of it. And we're putting them on notice that this is something that exists. We use it in cases where we decline charges, typically things like neighbor disputes, people arguing over the height or color of a fence that was painted, nuisance type violations, stuff like that. We use it in pre-filing diversion. So when we say, hey, before we file this case, we're going to give you an opportunity to make this right, participate in this program, and we won't file your charges. Post-filing, plea negotiations, we use them as terms in sentencing of probation, even post-sentencing. We have people who have gone to CDCR, our state prison system, who are looking at parole or their time is up, and there's an interest from the victims to engage with this person and talk about the harms that were caused. We'll even work with groups to facilitate those conversations. So really, restorative justice, we encourage you to be creative with it. It can fit anywhere that you think it's appropriate to fit. Next slide, please. Okay, key program elements. These are really important. This is something you need to have present if you're doing a restorative justice model. Without these things, you are not doing restorative justice. And trust me, in the beginning, we've had lots of people kind of give us constructive criticism about our program, whether or not it was truly restorative, and we have fine-tuned these things over the last decade. So one, it's got to be voluntary, because restorative justice is all about taking accountability. And you can't force accountability on a human being. You just can't. They have to accept it. It doesn't work unless they recognize that they did something wrong. So they need to be aware, they need to be willing to openly admit that they caused these harms. And if there's any resistance there, then you're not going to get the benefit from the restorative justice process. It's got to be confidential. People have to feel comfortable and safe in that space. They have to be able to bare their soul to the individuals in that room. If they're afraid that something's going to be used against them in court later, they're not going to do that. So you need to have a confidential proceeding. Victim consent is a two-way street, right? If we're going to have people engaging and have these conversations with each other, you can't force someone to come to that table. So the victim has to consent to it. We can do our program in a way where we use surrogate victims if the direct victim does not want to be involved. Sometimes we bring in law enforcement officers. Sometimes we bring in medical professionals. Victim advocates will often stand in as a surrogate. There are creative ways to get around that issue, but we always want to make sure that we are getting consent from the victims and that we allow them to be engaged in that process as much as they want to be engaged in the process, and no more. Defendant accepts responsibility. He has to not contest the offenses. Defendant participates in a restorative justice conference. This is sort of the whole point of restorative justice, right? You are trying to develop empathy in this person. You're trying to get them to recognize that they are causing a harm and that they are failing in their role that they owe to society, and they need to make it right with this. And in order to do that, they need to sit with members of the community, with the people who are harmed, and have those hard conversations and develop that sort of connection. When you don't have that sort of kumbaya, touchy-feely moment, then restorative justice it's not going to take, and it's not going to deter future behavior. And that's what we want at the end of the day. We want it to deter future behavior. There's often other collateral issues going on. It's not just about your harm that you cause, but maybe the harm that you're causing to yourself. Maybe there's a substance abuse issue that needs to be addressed. Maybe there's a mental health issue that needs to be addressed. Maybe the fact that you have been unable to find a job is really driving the issue, and that needs to be addressed. So dealing with those sort of collateral issues and engaging in the types of treatment or skill development that we want you to do, that's all really important as well. Next slide. All right, so what's the goal? Obviously, we want to put decisions in the hands of those who are most affected by crime. Sure, we're prosecutors. We are vested with a lot of power and a lot of discretion. We are representatives of the community, but that doesn't mean anything unless we're actually doing things the community wants us to do. And oftentimes, our constituents, they don't have a lot of skin in the game unless they're directly impacted by a crime. You don't hear from them. They don't engage with you unless there's some real high profile issue going on in your county, right? This kind of helps the community get involved, and it helps them have some stake in what you do as an office and the kinds of things you can do to help guarantee their safety and help people that need it. So it's bringing those people together through community volunteers to engage in this process, and it gives them some sort of ownership. Justice becomes more about sort of healing and transforming a person and turning them into a productive member of society so they're no longer causing havoc in your community. Reduces the likelihood of future offenses. Like we talked about, it's that empathy. You want to build that connection to the community so the individual goes, I could steal this from Walmart, but maybe I don't want to go down that road anymore. Maybe I want to do better. Maybe I want to actually support my community instead of, acting like a leech sucking from it day in and day out. It's sort of an idealistic hope, but at the end of the day, if we don't try, it's not going to happen. And a lot of individuals that walk away from that program after having these conversations, we don't see them come back. Our recidivism rates are pretty low. And it saves money and resources because you're not doing a traditional prosecution, which is always something we'd be cognizant of, given the fact that I'm sure, like us in California, a lot of you guys are having budget issues. The money's not there. Federal grants are sort of at risk at the moment. And you need to start thinking about cost cutting and savings. I'm going to pass it off to Nicole. She's going to talk a little bit about our specific RJP program and what it means.
All right. So we frame this in the context of our existing restorative justice partnership program, which was first piloted in 2013. So we've been developing that broad program to address criminal offenses in a different way. And then most recently, in partnership with APA, have focused in on retail theft and added some additional supports and expanded the diversion and what we do there. So our initial pilot program started in 2013, and as Preston described, we really use the principles of restorative justice in how we resolve criminal offenses separate from the traditional courtroom. Next slide. The real goal there is to encourage behavioral change that's going to lead to reduced recidivism and reduced justice system involvement for all those who are impacted by these offenses. So our target population for the base program is really misdemeanors, low-level felonies, low-risk individuals who have committed an offense but have an opportunity to make changes and will benefit from not having some of those more negative consequences, conviction, and those sort of things on their record, but still need to have an opportunity to be accountable, recognize what went wrong, and make those changes so that they don't return or remain in the system going forward. We engage people at various levels, pre and post charging, for those with higher level offenses or recognized or identified mental health needs. We are working with a social worker to try to perform additional assessments and make sure that they are provided the appropriate level of treatment. But for those who go through our standard diversion program, once they complete, the case is closed or dismissed. And there can also be other diversion options that may be available, but our restorative justice options do require that victim engagement. Next slide. At this point, our office really sees the benefits of restorative justice as very broad. So we try not to limit, the case types that can be eligible for this approach, but we do have a list of misdemeanor offenses that are presumed eligible. So those are automatically referred to our program for consideration. We definitely use discretion when there is prior history that poses a threat to public safety. We want to make sure that the people going through this program and the people involved are engaged in such a way that respects the needs of the victim and the public. Next slide. We take a slightly different stance when there are mental health or substance use needs. So we have a variety of programs that are based on a participant's condition. When there's mental health or substance use, we want to prioritize the treatment aspect. For our standard diversion, which includes the retail theft diversion, that is more centered on the offense type, and we tailor our approach based on that offense type. Next slide. So for the retail theft diversion expansion that we undertook, we really looked at how do we make our existing restorative justice model more tailored to meet the needs of this specific population. We did that by utilizing the needs assessment provided to make sure that we're really getting a good understanding of what needs are people coming into the program with, whether that's employment, behavioral health, financial. We want to make sure that we're getting a good sense of those needs and addressing those needs as directly as possible. We had more direct staff support associated with this program, so people were receiving initial contact, follow-ups, support at every stage through the conferencing process. And then we wanted to kind of interact with available resources and community-based providers to make sure that we had some really targeted programs that could be used as resources for people going through this program to address the needs that were identified. Participants also received a post-conference follow-up to look at kind of how that process worked. And this was specific to our petty theft, shoplifting, and retail theft offenses. Next slide. Next slide.
Okay, so we're running out of time, so I'm going to wrap this up a little bit quicker. Oh, there we go. We talked about sort of the successful elements of these programs. We're trying to teach people life skills, for one, so they don't have to resort to the same sort of behavior that they were doing before. We found that it actually helps success rates if they have to pay a fee. It's a nominal fee. We offer fee waivers for them who, when they can't afford it, or we'll trade it out for community service hours instead of money. But it kind of gives them some skin in the game as well. And we find that success rates are much higher when they actually pay for the programming to some degree. We don't look at case value specifically. We keep an open mind about the types of cases we take. We offer support from experienced case managers. We make it very clear what our expectations are. We don't move the ball. We don't hide it. They know exactly what they're getting into when they sign up. And we get constant communication, because this population that we typically serve, they're not exactly known for showing up on time and reaching out when they need to. So it really takes a lot of effort to stay in contact with them, make sure that they're following through with what they signed up for. Next slide. Okay, so we were involved with RELA. RELA is a national organization who advocates for retail theft, and through them we were introduced to NASP, the National Association for Shoplifting Prevention. We developed a partnership with NASP, and we decided to use them for some of our low-level retail theft educational opportunities. Next slide. Again, they're education-based. They provide individual case plans, and they really focus on the individual themselves. We use our own community-based providers to supplement those programs, like All Leaders Must Serve and the Minds Resource Foundation. So it's really a collaboration of multiple entities that makes this work. Next slide, please. It's a little bit about NASP. You guys will have the slides. You can read about them, but they're a nonprofit 501c3, and they've been doing this work for decades now. They have a lot of good data on retail theft. They really know what we're doing, and I think we've really enjoyed their partnership. They've been a great help to us. Next slide. This is their approach. It modeled our approach very closely, which is what we really liked about them. They fit right into our restorative justice model, and so we just were able to plug and play with them. Next slide. And so some quick results: 100% enrollment rate, 94% completion rate, 97% value assessment. Over just about half of them admitted that this wasn't the first time that they had stolen. And they kind of give us some good insight into why people commit these crimes to begin with. Next slide. This is a model of what our case plans look like. You guys have access to this, of course, and it'll be provided with the resources. On the last slide. And this is talking about All Leaders Must Serve. It's a local organization, provides young adults 15 to 25 through job training, self-sufficiency training, trying to get them a living wage so that they can become meaningful participants in the community. And last slide. And this is the Minds Resource Foundation. 6 to 8 week program aims to provide tailored support and resources to help individuals participate in diversion outcome challenges, and they achieve stability at the end of the day. Another one of our partnerships that's crucial for this to work. And with that, we're going to pass things off to Dr. Jensen. Thank you so much.
You're on mute, Dr. Jensen.
Oh, thank you for that. Of course, someone has to do it. So, hello everyone. I'm Sarah Jensen. I'm a senior associate with Justice System Partners, and I was involved in this project as the external evaluator. Next slide. So the goal of the research was actually, this is part of a project of 4 different sites that we worked with, 2 of whom we just saw present, and the other 2 I will talk a little bit more about. So we're really looking today at who is entering into these different 4 programs and how does it differ between them. And we've talked a lot about wanting to gain insight into why people are committing these offenses and what kind of leads to it. What are their needs? What are the ways that we can help support people to avoid these sorts of issues in the past? I want to add that because we're working with 4 different sites that I'll get into, some of the sites are really new, so it's too early to look into recidivism data. So for example, recidivism analyses typically require at least 6 months follow-up period. And with a couple of the programs, we're looking at people who were just completed in the past month or so. So waiting a little bit to do that more in-depth analysis. When we have all 4 sites. Next slide. Perfect. So the 4 sites in this study, as you heard from Columbus and Yolo County already, but the other 2 are East Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and Santa Monica, California. I want to note that these 4 sites all participated in the project with APA, are highlighted heavily throughout the toolkit and lessons learned that I really encourage you all to check out. And all 4 of these programs are very different. You got a sense of that from hearing about Columbus and Yolo County earlier. But I just want to give a quick, very brief nod to the fact that these are very different, and we are doing an analysis of a lot of differently nuanced programs that unfortunately don't have time to get into the nuance of all of them right now. Next slide. Perfect. So in total, across the 4 sites, we had 111 participants who were included in the evaluation. The number varied between sites. You can see Yolo County had the most. And note that these analyses are of kind of different time periods. So with the variation, that's part of the reason for that. There were also very different requirements and eligibility considerations between programs, which led to more or fewer people between programs. Next slide. So one of the interesting things that we saw when we were looking at an evaluation of who was in these different programs is that there were actually a lot more women being diverted than perhaps one might expect. You can see this across all of the sites where in total, over half of participants are women. So we know this is very different than who is traditionally participating in criminal legal system activity at every stage. Arrests are roughly 80% men, 20% women. So this is a really substantial reversal. Women are typically represented or overrepresented proportionally in diversion programs anyway, based in part of the type of offenses that are eligible for diversion and some other factors. But we also need to think about this in terms of women potentially being more involved in retail theft proportionally to other offenses. And also reflections on women having shorter criminal records and therefore being more eligible for these different diversion programs, as well as some different social factors about how women versus men are viewed, different caretaking responsibilities. But when thinking about who is in these programs and what needs to be addressed, what needs they have that need to be addressed, it is important to think about gendered components as well. Next slide. Perfect. So across the criminal legal system, there are racial disparities. This is not news to anyone. So we are already aware that we are looking within a system that has these racial disparities, and we're actually seeing a higher representation of marginalized individuals in diversion programs, which is really interesting finding and not something that should be viewed as good or bad per se, because what is what is notable about these diversion programs too is that they can be used as an opportunity to connect people to additional services. So even if there are disproportionately racial disparities within diversion programs, it's probably a broader nod to the system and that there is an attempt to connect people to resources. Next slide. So I should also briefly touch on ethnicity data. Only our California sites had ethnicity data. So we see similar findings to race, but because we only have 2 sites, there isn't as much to say, and ethnicity data in the criminal legal system is always a little bit undercounted too. Next slide. Perfect. So interestingly, in these programs, age skewed a little bit older than one might expect. There was an average of roughly 33 years old. Very wide range within each program, so should be, taken with a grain of salt. But this potentially aligns with the different needs and types of individuals who are participating in these kind of crimes of poverty, which is what we'll dive into now. So next slide. Perfect. So the goal of the needs assessment that each participant in each program had to complete was to really understand who the participants are and where they might need support. It covers a wide range of topics, as you can see, looking at mental health, substance use, housing, employment, finances, public benefits, and more. Santa Monica's program was a little bit had some different eligibility, so that's they completed a separate needs assessment. But as we've heard from the earlier presenters, we're working with a population who is often committing these crimes of needs and is experiencing all of these barriers. So, and this is exactly what they said, the data pans that out. So let's talk a little bit more about who we're looking at. Perfect. So nearly 70% of participants overall, and you can see the variation between sites, indicated having a behavioral health, which I refer to as mental health and substance use challenge. The severity varied very widely between participants from fairly mild to intensive, requiring more involved treatment services. Obviously, nearly 70% is higher than the general population. So it's certainly something that contributes and needs to be addressed when thinking about what needs to occur in these diversion programs. Next slide. But when looking at the needs assessment data even more carefully, the issue that came up time and time again was finances and employment opportunities, which makes sense for low-level retail theft. When people are stealing things that are related to their needs. So what's really interesting here and kind of goes against some of the narratives out there is half of participants are already employed. And of those who are not employed, the vast majority were looking for work. So taken together, the people who are employed plus the people who are actively looking for work is over 80%. We're really looking at a population who, generally speaking, are trying to provide for themselves, who are trying to be employed and, contributing in that way, not people who are maybe relying on the system or stealing as an alternative to work. So I think that's a really important thing to note. Next slide. And this kind of points to the barriers experienced by diversion participants who are seeking employment, much of which was spoken to earlier by previous panelists. So something that we saw among participants who were seeking employment was this huge barrier of transportation, which is something that is challenging to address and also challenging to understand in diversion programs too, because often, there will be some sort of employment resource that may connect someone to a job, but if they can't physically get there, that doesn't really actually pan out. The same applies for childcare, which we know can be very expensive and a barrier, as well as criminal history prohibiting them from some different jobs. And you can see the others as well. Next slide. So these are kind of the key employment takeaways, but we can dive into finances too, just in the interest of time. Okay, so something that is really important to understand about financial circumstances too is we are looking at a population with an annual income of under $20,000 a year. So nearly 80% are making under $20,000 per year, and over 60% are receiving at least one public benefit. So we're looking at individuals who really, especially those who have dependents or children, especially if childcare is a barrier to getting a position, have really limited options for receiving, for kind of providing for themselves in the way that would limit need for retail theft too, which is something really important to think about when you're thinking about your diversion program and how to approach that in terms of thinking about what people's needs are and what might be the contributing and driving factors. And I think also that can lead to more success when there's this more collaborative and supportive environment, acknowledging that these are individuals who are trying to get by on that low of an income. So over 1/3 also said that they were worried about running out of food by the end of the month. So when you're thinking again about low-level retail theft, and when it's food related, that's important to consider. And over 50% said that they would benefit from financial training too, which kind of defies like the stereotypes of those who commit low-level retail theft. But even with financial training, it's hard to make $20,000 a year stretch when people have families, which was often the case. I also want to note for this that participants have the option of skipping questions, and finances is always an area where people are particularly likely to skip or decline to answer. That's not unique to this, but that should always be a caveat to these questions. Next slide, too. Perfect. And this is a recap of what I just said too. I think it's often easier to have them back to back in the slides. But again, nearly 80% making under $20,000 per year, over 50% reporting that they never or only sometimes have enough money to meet their needs, and over 60% receiving at least one public benefit. Next slide. So taking a step back, I just want to overview what we've learned about these participants and why it might be important to consider these different factors when thinking through a diversion program. So we're thinking about women being disproportionately represented in retail theft diversion programs, which is really important to think about when looking at when looking at setting up a retail theft diversion program. Are there specific needs or gender justice perspectives that should be incorporated, or just kind of a mindfulness that we're looking at a different population? Racially and ethnically marginalized individuals were disproportionately represented in retail theft diversion programs, which again isn't necessarily a positive or negative thing, but should be considered when looking at creating these retail theft diversion programs. It can be an opportunity to look to increase racial and ethnic equity with kind of deliberate action. 2/3 of participants live with behavioral health conditions, so substance use or mental health, meaning that those it's important to be aware of what needs those might raise. I think probably preaching to the choir here about people who are system involved and addressing kind of some of the most widely acknowledged needs. And I think, again, the financial piece is really important to consider, where over 80% of participants either are employed or are actively pursuing employment. So just understanding that as a landscape, and also when thinking about diversion program requirements, sometimes diversion program requirements can, like, someone needs to report to an office midday or go to an appointment. And these are things that might actually conflict with employment, like employment schedules. So really important to, when creating those different conditions, think about, okay, if we're hoping that people are remaining employed and able to make a living. We don't want to implement conditions that necessarily conflict with that. So how do we create conditions that encourage employment while also, meeting the different needs? And again, this kind of goes to those who are currently unemployed but looking for jobs face numerous barriers to employment opportunities. So important to think about when offering, employment services that can connect individuals, thinking about, okay, is this actually feasible? Is this a place that's on a bus line? Because otherwise it's, those barriers are going to remain. And even if they're able to maybe secure the position, it wouldn't be a long-term option. So thinking about that really deliberately when addressing that. And yes, that's my presentation. So happy to connect to, always love to talk research. So thanks everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jensen. It's really eye-opening to hear about the different root causes of the low-level theft and to see it borne out in the data. I think that's really helpful for those interested in maybe standing up their own programs to really understand what that looks like across the 4 sites who all have unique populations and also develop their own tailored programs. It's now time to open it up for questions for our speakers. So please, if you have a question for any of our speakers, feel free to add it to the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel, and I will happily read that aloud for our panelists. There is a question that came in, and it is specific to you, Jen, in Columbus, on your retailers and how your merchants submit the cases that they're interested in joining the program. And I think a sort of add on to that question, and I think for Yolo as well, is the role that the business community played in either how did you engage your business community? What role did the retailers play in the development of your program or the expansion of it? How should folks think about the role of retailers in developing a low-level theft program? And maybe Jen, we'll start with you.
So essentially, we've developed this direct filing program, and any merchant that wants to participate within our jurisdiction can come in and get trained on how to submit their packets. And then they submit all of their packets for the processing of criminal charges, and they're told on the front end, hey, we're going to consider every submission for the diversion program. The deflection one is specific where we've got the pilot programs, and so they are understanding how that we're kind of double screening their cases. But so essentially they're submitting all of their criminal charges that they want to prosecute based on their own parameters as far as like the level of the offense and that kind of thing to us for filing. And then we're on our end reaching back out to say, hey, of these 10 that you submitted, 7 of them are appropriate for diversion. Basically speak up if you have a complaint or, you don't want somebody in diversion, but otherwise we're going to offer them the diversion program. And then to the second part of the question, I would just say, the partnership and relationship with the merchants is so important. So if you don't already have a direct filing program in place, working on how you kind of bring those merchants to the table is super important. We did an all merchant meeting last year where we brought in representatives from all of our merchants to just again go over what the program is, what we're doing, how our merchants are filing, what disgruntlement they might have. And it's also nice for them to feel like they have a voice in the criminal justice system, even outside of the diversion programming. So if they have complaints about how their cases have been handled or how things are proceeding, they feel like they can stop into my office and talk to me about that because of the relationship we've already developed with them.
So I think the same is for us, 99% of what Jen just said. Our direct file program that we have in place called FastPass, it's not geared towards diversion so much. It's meant for the most prolific pains that these retailers have, people that have stolen $25,000 worth of Legos over the course of a couple like months. Like that's the type of person that program's designed for. But obviously those individuals oftentimes have their own mental health, substance use issues as well. So we're not saying absolutely not, we're just less likely to take them. But in order to develop that program, I mean, it came from my elected Jeff Reisig at a RELA conference and sitting down with CEOs and vice presidents of these major companies and having a conversation and them having buy-in to this idea. And so we developed it based on that. What I would like to see more of in Yolo is on our diversion cases actually having loss prevention officers and participants in the companies coming to our conferences and sitting down with these individuals and having these conversations. I've tried, I've offered, it's a hard sell. Apparently 10 or 15 years ago, maybe longer, a big box store that everyone here is familiar with went through some pretty serious lawsuits because they got involved with a company that was providing restorative justice, but it was a sham and the court said it's extortion and they got sued. And so now all the legal departments are like, no, we're not going to touch this, thank you. So that's a concern that you have to have with your retailers. So there's some trust building that's going to have to happen if you're going to do that kind of work. And the only way you build trust is to sit down, have a cup of coffee and chat so they understand like you're not there to sabotage them. You're not out to get them. You just want to help. We're with the government. We're here to help kind of mentality.
Yeah, that's great. And it's also key to really understand what their challenges are too and what they're facing. And so just having that relationship is really key. And I just wanted to also note that the Fast Pass program that Preston mentioned is also, if you want to learn more about it, it's part of our toolkit. So please feel free to go ahead and check out that resource. And our sites are more than happy to be connected with you all if you have any further questions about their work. We have one final question, and hopefully we could do a quick wrap, but how do either programs handle reaching out to potential participants that are unhoused or have no stable address?
Do you want me to? I'll go first again too. So that's actually a really difficult one for our program. Specifically, our program requires that the participant have a phone because 99% of the time that's how they're going to communicate with their community health worker to gain access to the resources. So if they are unhoused, we struggle with that. If they have a phone and they can charge it, maybe they're at a homeless shelter or if they're staying on someone's couch, then that's less of a problem as far as them having a stable address. But that is one area that we really struggle in because we do see a lot of people come through that need housing resources. And as I'm sure you're probably aware with your jurisdiction, those are few and far between. So that's definitely a struggle.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely a challenge that we face as well. It's also informed some of the partnerships and expansions that we've really worked to strengthen. So part of the reason that we want this program to be available at different entry points, so pre-filing, post-charging, pre-plea, is because we may not be able to reach someone prior to filing a case. And we need to respect those timelines. We will reach out by phone, email if we have it. We will attempt text. We send a letter, sometimes multiple letters. But if we can't reach someone, especially if it's because they don't have that consistent, address or point of contact, we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to still offer this option because we still see a benefit, especially around connection to resources. We also work very closely with our local public defender, defense counsel. So if somebody is, accepted into the program post-filing, has representation, we'll coordinate with them. Can they come into your office? Can they come into our office? Can we, create some supports to make sure that we can get in contact and provide what they need to participate. So we do make, extensive efforts to try to accommodate people's needs, but it's still a challenge.
Thank you both so much. Thank you to all of our incredible speakers. I think we have to wrap up now, but Jennifer, Preston, Nicole, Dr. Jensen, thank you so much for sharing your work and your insights with us today. You've just demonstrated that this work is doable and it is powerful, especially when grounded in collaboration and data. So learn more about this work and other work at our Retail Theft Diversion Toolkit, as well as our Lessons Learned Guide, which has a lot more information. And please feel free to reach out to us with any questions at all. You can reach out at info@apainc.org. Thank you once again to all of you for joining us. We hope this has sparked some new ideas and conversations in your own jurisdictions. Have a great afternoon. Thanks, everyone.